Good evening, everyone. I'm Ollie Coombe from Timber Auctions. I've been involved in productive forestry for 35 years. Primarily, I worked for a large sawmilling company as a timber buyer, sawmill manager, and also dealt with co-product sales and latterly sawn timber tray sales. Since 2013, I've been running Timber Auctions, which is an online portal for selling standing and felled timber, and I also do a small amount of woodland management in the Vale of York and on the North Yorks moors. So tonight we're going to run, there's three real elements of the presentation. There's an introduction to timber sales, the key considerations that you as the landowner or woodland owner should make, explanation of timber grades and prices currently, the key elements of a sale agreement, that's so that you understand what you should be looking at, what you should be recording and detailing, and how to prepare a successful timber sale agreement. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. So there's a few assumptions we have to make for a timber sale. Hopefully, you've already had a felling license in place or a management plan, and that will mean that it is legal to fell the timber that you're offering to the market. Key consideration that. Ideally, it would be good to have an inventory so that you know what is in the stand of timber, species, DBH, volume and number of trees. It can be done from a sample plot. The days of a full tariff being done on standing sales are gone, but generally it's sample plot on a larger sample plot per hectare, on a small blocks 5 sample plots per hectare, and that will give you enough knowledge of what's there for the buyers to present meaningful information. Effectively, the more work you do measuring your timber and understanding it, you are de-risking the sale for the buyer, and the less risk there is, the better the price he can offer. So when you come to sell the timber, first thing to do is sit down and understand what are your objectives of the sale. Is it a thinning operation that you're doing to improve the crop, and therefore the quality of the job is critical and that it's done to deliver your silvicultural objectives? Is it for cash flow? Do you need it to fund other work in the forest, for example, roading or something like that? Or is it your clear fell, which some growers come to me and they've spent 50 years growing a forest, they've thinned it 3 or 4 times and they've made the decision they want to clear fell it, and this is the time when they're going to cash their timber crop in. So consider your objectives, because that has an influence on the type of sale and the audience to which the parcel is advertised. It's a good idea to understand the state of the timber market, particularly if you're in what we call a marginal location. So if you're near to the main markets, your timber prices tend to be more stable. If you're a marginal location like North Lincolnshire, South Yorkshire, across into the Peak District, when the market falls away, you tend to find in those areas the timber prices fall much further than they do in the right next to the main markets. A big consideration is to make sure that stakeholders or other people who have an interest in the woodland know what's going on and why you're doing it. So there are statutory consultees that are the Forestry Commission informed through the felling license programme thing, but also tenants, neighbours, maybe other family members. Understand if there's any constraints on the site. The obvious one is wildlife. So if you've got badgers, birds of prey, dormice, rare fauna and flora, make sure you understand what's there, get that recorded and get the appropriate permissions in place. But also ancient monuments, steep ground, dry stone walls, anything that should really be a factor in the timber sale, because what you as the landowner are doing, you're going to employ a professional manager to prepare the sale for you so that you can hand the sale over to the successful purchaser at the pre-commencement meeting. And timber selling is following the way of the construction industry, where it's becoming the person who commissions the work, the landowner, his job is to appoint a competent contractor and make the contractor aware of any constraints and relevant information on the site, but then hand the work over to be done by the competent contractor. Understand if there's any restrictive covenants. It's always good to look at your access agreement and check to see what that is for. Quite commonly, they will have a width restriction. Some of them are horrendous because they're 8 feet, some are 12, and some are in meters. They should say for forestry management and harvesting purposes. Some of them only say for management purposes. So check that before you go to market. And also, is the access suitable for timber lorries? It may be that the in-forest access is good, but you then need to consult with the highways to make sure that the turn out onto the road is suitable for the wagons to turn out there. If you have to upgrade the access onto the road, you probably need planning permission and to liaise with the highways department about that. It's not a quick process. So once you've got everything lined up to start preparing the sale, make sure you clearly map the boundaries, map any hazards or constraints, identify the access routes. And for example, if it's a mixed parcel, there's an area of clear fell, there is an area of first thinning, there's different species, things you want to produce an operations map that shows where they are. You should provide your contractor with all the necessary information so that he can do his own risk assessment, safe systems of work. You would want to check or your manager should check that the contractor competencies are there. So do the operators have the right certificates for the machines they're operating? You should have a pre-commencement meeting where you effectively hand the site over to them. And at that point, you would ask the contractor or the Forest Works manager to produce an emergency response card so that if there is an accident, the route to the site or the point at which first aid or the emergency vehicles can get to is correctly identified. As an interesting aside, a lot of the ambulances work on postcodes, and what 3 words is absolutely essential, because about 3 years ago I was going through Castle Howard and got flagged down on the road by a lady very distressed. Her husband had collapsed. They were out walking at the side of the road. They'd rung the ambulance, but the ambulance didn't know where they were, because that particular road, when she described it, that postcode was 5 miles long. So I had what 3 words on the phone, and we were able to give the ambulance driver the what 3 words location, and he was then able to get to us using that, following it on his phone. If he'd had to rely on the postcode, it would have taken a long time. You want to have clearly identified roles and responsibilities. So you have the landowner or the landowner's representative, and his job is to provide the information and the sale particulars. The Forest Works manager generally works for the merchant who's bought the timber. He oversees the contract and he draws up most of the risk assessments and attends the pre-commencement meeting. He will then have a site safety coordinator who's normally the contractor. Check that the merchant and his contractors have the correct public and employers liability insurance in place. Generally, you need £5 million. And then you will have to have a sale agreement signed by the purchaser and the seller, which details effectively the quantities, the time scale, the payment process, and the price. And it should also have a mechanism in there for if there's a dispute or any problems, how that's going to be resolved. And agree with whoever's managing the contract for you what the process of contract management is. So how often will you be visiting the site? How often are the waste tickets going to be processed, and when are the invoices going to be issued for the timber, and what is the payment scale? What do you do if there's a late payment? How are you going to follow that up? What point do you stop the work and say no more timber leaves the site until we're paid for it? When you come to sell timber, you've really got 3 options. By far the most common is a standing sale, where the timber is marked, measured, and then it's identified and put out for sale, and the buyers then bid for that standing sale, either offer you a price outturn or a lump sum for it if it's all been measured. Thinnings historically, the vendor used to market. Now it's quite common that the vendor or his agent will sample mark the crop, and then it'll be done by feller selection from then on. So the contractor will be selecting the trees to fell. Again, you have to have a good relationship with your contractor. You have to make sure that they understand what the marking and what the criteria is for what you want removed and what has to be left. In some circumstances, quite common in the firewood market, it's the main method of sale for hardwood saw logs. The owner will pay to have the timber felled, extracted, dressed and presented at roadside, and the buyers will then offer a price, if it's firewood or biomass, a price per tonne at roadside. Generally, if it's hardwood saw logs, they will offer a lump sum price based on the seller's measure. Very occasionally, the vendor will actually contract someone to harvest the timber and to haul it, and he will be paid a delivered in price to the end users of the sawmill, chipwood market or firewood market. It's normally a price per tonne. It's pretty rare these days. There's one or two largest estates which still run their own harvesting squads or use contract harvesting, and they do that. But it is not as common as it was. How you choose to sell the timber, there are a number of methods. There is private negotiation, where you approach a known organisation and negotiate a price with them. There's what you call a restricted tender, where you ask your landowner or your representative to send the details to 3 or 4 people, get the prices back, and with his help you then choose the successful purchaser. Or you can go to a full open market sale, and at timber auctions we do 2 sorts of sale, which is either an open market tender or latterly a full auction, which is a live online auction where the details are sent out, the bidders log in, they place a bid, and they are then updated automatically if they're outbid or if they're the successful bidder when the sale closes. I mean, this is a simple model that explains where the value of the tree comes from. Now, depending on the stage of the growth of the tree, if it's a 20-year-old first thinning tree, the percentage of chipwood can be quite high, whereas if it's a 3rd or 4th thinning of mature spruce or very good quality conifer, you can have probably 70–80% of the value coming from saw logs and 20–30% coming from small roundwood. But at the moment in thinnings, small roundwood in the top of the tree, 20–30%. The sort of lower 2/3 of the tree will give you 2/3 of the value, and that's coming from saw logs, firewood, chipwood, small roundwood or energy wood. Potentially, stump harvesting can give income. It's not something I've been involved with recently or sold, although we do increasingly when we sell the standing timber auctions, we're also on a price per product sale asking for a price for the brash, and it does make a cash positive. In a clear fell situation, you see the value can vary much more. If you've got a good quality crop with a high saw log content, and I sold one last month in Wales, 1.1 average Sitka spruce, had been thinned 4 times, and it was 90% saw log, and a little bit of pallet wood and then small roundwood. You can then, if you've got a windblown crop of pine and larch on the top of a hill somewhere in Northumberland, you can be right down, it can be 50–60% pulpwood, chipwood and small roundwood, maybe 30–40% saw log. In some really poor lodgepole pine crops, you can be down at 10% log and pallet. As a general rule, in most trees, in softwoods, the saw logs are the most valuable product. Generally, a saw log is clean and straight, relatively small lot, knots, 16 centimetre minimum top diameter, and it's in lengths of 3.1, 3.7, 4.3 and 4.9 metre lengths, occasionally 6 metre, and that fits in with the standard carcassing and fencing sizes that the sawmills sell into the merchanting sector. Pallet wood is a slightly lower grade. It can have a slight bit of bow and it can be a bit more knotty, 14 to 24 centimetres, and it's normally 2.5 metre lengths, occasionally 3.1, and that is what's used for making the bearers and boards on pallets, which are used in the distribution industry. Fencing logs, you really got two categories. You've got the 2.5 and 3.7 metre fencing quality saw logs, and then you've got what you call bars and slat logs, which tend to be 14 centimetre diameter, 1.9, 2.5, 3.1, 3.4 and 3.7 metre lengths. They are being cut into fence rails, slats for panels, feather edge boarding, any of the components that are used in the garden and landscaping sector. And then you have small roundwood, which is normally the top of the tree, 7 centimetres in the current market. When they're short of wood, 5 centimetres, normally 1.8 metre minimum length, 2.2, 2.5 up to 3 metres. With hardwoods, historically you did get a bit of veneer log in the oak in the UK, but it's very, very rare now. Normally your highest grade is planking, particularly in oak. That's where the highest value is. That's going into the furniture, the shop fitting, and the upper end flooring market. Your next grade down tends to be beam oak, although very good quality beam oak, which is long length, so 20 foot plus and large diameter, so 300 mil section plus, that that can be right up at the competing on price with oak planking. Fencing is the lowest grade of sawn oak, but again, strong demand for it currently because it's durable. It's got a very, very high natural resistance to rot and decay, and that is increasingly important as there's problems with the preservation of softwoods for fencing and a lot more ground contact uses. Latterly, a bit of an interest in sweet chestnut coming in alongside oak in the fencing grades, just as a slightly cheaper alternative to oak. And then when you're felling oak sawlog trees, you will also get the tops and the trees that don't make the fencing and beam grade. They are cut into what you call cordwood, which is 6 or 8 foot length. It mainly goes to firewood. It tends to have a lower value in the firewood market because it's often quite bent, knotty, and the brown species are not as valuable. When you cut the white woods, such as beech, oak, ash, sycamore, they do have a value for saw logs, but it tends to be for the export market. There are 1 or 2 niche markets in the UK that will take very good quality ash and sycamore, but they're small quantities. So if you're going to clear fell that, it's very important that you understand the export market, because it can in some areas be that the best quality beech is worth more as firewood than it is as saw logs. And then firewood with hardwoods, it's a fantastic market at the moment. They'll pretty much take anything. The UK, they very much prefer the white hardwoods, so ash, sycamore, beech, and to an extent birch, but in the UK that's got a lower value than the ash, beech and sycamore. One of the curious elements of the hardwood industry is that when you fell and sell hardwoods, the industry still likes to work in an old-fashioned imperial measure called hoppus, which is the square volume you get out of a log. So if you look in the top diagram, if you've got a round log and you measure, the hoppus is the square that fits into it. Now, 1 cubic metre of timber in cubic feet is about 35 cubic feet, but the hoppus measure, you get 27.74 hoppus feet per cubic metre of logs. If you try and sell them logs measured in cubic meters, they scratch their heads and put you an offer in hoppers feet. So I'm afraid that's how it's measured. The UK still operates primarily its timber sales on weight. So what that means is when your timber is felled, it's stacked at roadside, loaded onto a lorry, and the lorry will either weigh itself en route at a public weighbridge, or it will be weighed in at the purchaser's site, and you will be paid in pounds per tonne on the weighbridge. Many years ago, there were volume sales, but that went out of fashion when timber prices were down very, very low in the early 90s and late 90s and 2000s, and weight was used because it was a very, very simple way of measuring load. It was cheap to administer and it was easy to verify. So it is still, I would say probably 98% of timber is still sold by weight. Very occasionally, where there is no means to measure it, or if it's a very, very high value crop like long length Douglas fir logs or large larch logs or nice ash ones, it will be measured and you will lay it out at roadside and it will be measured on length and top diameter or mid diameter, volumized, and the logs will be, as they're loaded on the lorry, the volume tally is recorded, it's delivered to the mill and they pay you on the price per cubic meter for the logs that you've delivered. Very occasionally, firewood is still, or biomass is still sold in a stack measure, where you measure the stack, you apply a conversion factor to take it back to the solid content, and you advertise it and seek prices in pounds per cubic meter at roadside. It is open to considerable amount of error because, particularly with firewood and biomass, it can be very variable. If you've got straight saw logs and you measure the stack and you times it by 0.6, you will be pretty accurate in terms of working out what the solid wood content is. Neatly stacked spruce small roundwood will be 0.55 is the correct conversion factor, but if you get rough tops of pine off mature old trees or tops of oak from where you've been taking saw logs, you can be down at 0.45 or 0.5 conversion factor from the stack measure down to the solid measure, even lower if it's particularly rough oak. The only real area where sale by volume is still used is high value softwood logs like large diameter Douglas fir and larch, or oak saw logs, occasionally ash saw logs being sold at roadside. So at the moment, as a general rule, we had a price spike in 2021. 2022 was a year of market correction, so prices fell back steadily due to uncertainty elsewhere in the world. It appears they've now stabilised. We're at the bottom of the market cycle, or starting to see the green shoots of spring, depending on your view. But saw logs are around £80 a tonne delivered. Pallet wood and fencing bars 70, chipwood and biomass 60, fencing timber 65, and then hardwood firewood, well, 90, but you do hear prices of 100, 110, even 120 in the Midlands being paid at the moment, which completely unprecedented that firewood is the highest value product in the assortments. Hardwood prices, if you're going to grow good quality hardwood to sell, oak and more oak. The beauty of oak is that it's got many different grades. You've potentially veneer, you've got planking, first grade beam, second grade beam, fencing and firewood. So the very, very best planking grade is fetching around £20 a hopper's foot at roadside. Beam oak regularly gets to 15, can be higher. Fencing 8 if it's okay, poor quality 5. You've got to contrast that with white logs, ash, sycamore and beech going for export. A good price is £3 a hopper's foot. Normal is 250 to 275, and the run of the mill is £2 a hopper's foot. And at those prices, it's probably better selling it to firewood. I mean, if you do have very, very good white ash and it's large diameter, you might get £4 or £4.50 a hopper's foot, but you'll probably only be able to sell 2 or 3 loads a year at that price. And you've got to find the right markets. Once you've got all this price information and you've got the prices back and you've accepted a price, you then need to draw up an agreement with the purchaser. And this is just the key points you've got to consider. Accurate describe what you're selling, so the species, the tree size, the compartment. Make sure that you've included location, hazards and constraints map, access and boundaries. Include the felling license, so either a copy of the felling license number, or if it's from a management plan, the management plan number. And this allows the buyer to verify that it is legal timber that he's purchasing. In the firewood market, they're like that. The main softwood markets will not touch it unless they've got the felling license number. Record the price, the unit and method of payment. So is it payment by lump sum? Is it payment on outturn? Is it pounds per tonne, pounds a hopper's foot, or pounds a cubic metre? And then are the terms, is it payment on 30 days, 60 days or 90 days, or is it lump sum up front? It's a good idea if there's any special conditions to the site, for example, environmental constraints or access arrangements. If you're going past a school and you don't want the wagons there between 8 and 9:15 in the morning, or 3 and 4:30, make sure that's recorded in the contract documentation, and cover yourself on your health and safety requirements. The FISA guides are absolutely excellent in describing what each person in the chain has to do. So primarily it's the landowner's representative, the forest works manager and the site safety coordinator. And that it quite clearly details whose roles and responsibilities are and at which point you hand that over. You've also got to consider if something goes wrong with the timber sale. So classic one is roading. Whose job is it to maintain the road? And what is the reporting structure? So if the road does start to degrade, who reports that? When does your representative go and have a look, and how quickly can you get an excavator and stone onto site to repair it? Also, if they fell a tree over the boundary fence, what the process is for that to be repaired or made good. God help you if they fell a tree on a power line or a property. Make sure that they've got the insurance in place and you've got a copy of that certificate in your contract file. Increasingly, biosecurity is good. You need to make sure the machine is decontaminated coming onto the site and decontaminated going off, and that current best practice is followed. The termination. So there are a lot of reasons as to why a contract should be terminated or may be terminated, but you need to actually have a clear idea in your mind as to what the process for termination is, how you notify the contract holder, what the timescale is for them to leave site, and what the process is for then restarting the contract or reassigning it. Interesting one last year was there was a number of, in 2020, spring 2022, number of standing sales being sold. The guys were working their way through them. Storm Arwen comes along and the whole thing's flat round them. Whose risk is it? And what was the wording for the contract? The other one is you must have clear guidelines as to when you start and finish the contract. And if the contract's overrunning, then there needs to be a process by which written permission is given to extend the contract, and that is agreed by both parties. There are another couple of webinars being held. One is about how to engage forestry contractors on the 14th of March. woodland management and geospatial mapping on the 21st of March. I think that's a learning exercise for me. I shall be attending that to learn. And that's enough of listening to me. Time for any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, sorry, Rosanna, if I may, just to say that there's some of the information that Ollie presented we'll be picking up on next week's seminars about engaging forestry contracting services. So there's some points there, particularly around roles, responsibilities, gathering information, that kind of thing that we'll pick up on in more detail. I'll just mention that before we hand over to questions.
So if anyone has a question, if you could raise your hand, which is along the top of that's it. So Alex has found the raise hand function. Alex, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much for a nice presentation. And actually, I would like to, do you hear me?
Yes, it's listening.
Yeah, and when you told about ways of measurements by weight and by cubic meters or volume units, actually, how can you confirm that 1 cubic meter is 1 cubic meter and 1 ton is 1 ton? What tools and ways do you use, between buyer and seller to arrive at an agreement that, something is constant?
Well, that's a whole. I've been involved in buying and selling timber for 30 years, and I have been and travelled to Europe, and I know that the UK is probably alone in relying on tonnage sales. And the general system is that the weighbridge has to be verified by weights and measures. So you should only accept a weigh ticket from a certified weighbridge. There is also measurement conventions, which are out of the Forestry Commission Blue Book. It used to be booklet 39, and that details some standard top diameter and mid diameter tables. They are actually quite old and they work on assumed taper rates. The whole subject of measurement is one where technology is, in my view, going to become very, very important, because I know in New Zealand they are electronically measuring whole crops, producing a full tariff with every single tree digitally measured, and then they are selling lump sum sales based on that. In the UK, if you tried to do that, you would get no bids. So it is a very, very primitive system, and it's ripe for innovation and change, but it's also a low cost system. Everyone understands it and it's easy to verify it, which is the way certificate. Or you go to the booklet 39 and you measure the logs and you put a 20 centimetre, 4.9 metre log, it's 0.2 of a cubic metre under bark.
Okay, and such an addition, so you know that there is a difference between Europe and the United Kingdom in units of measurements, like metric and imperial units of measurement. Yeah. And actually, where I can get some like standards of conversion, and where can I get rates for conversion?
So the Bible of that is the Forestry Commission Forest Mensuration Handbook. It used to be booklet 39, but that gives all the agreed conventions between the Forestry Commission and the industry. Logs in this country are volumized using Humber's formula, and they have an assumed taper of 1 in 120. Some of the saw logs now have 3D, some of the sawmills now have 3D scanners online. Yeah. And depending which cut, so if your first cut, your butt cut, will have a slightly higher taper. If you take a middle cut, it will have a lower taper. So some of that is redundant now. And other European countries have, particularly the Scandinavians and Baltics, have much more highly evolved measuring conventions and independent measuring agencies. We don't have any of that in the UK.
Yeah, and we have a problem here with, you know, nominal sizes and actual sizes.
Yeah. Yep. Ovality. That there. I do stress that it's 1970s and 80s technology. It's from the infancy of the industry. The capability of some of the measuring devices now way exceed, in terms of accuracy, what we're selling to, what we're using to measure it, the formulas.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now I got your point.
Look at booklet 39 and then scratch your head as to why we use 2 centimetre diameter classes when we can measure to fractions of a millimetre.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Put the link in the chat. Sean, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? If not, I'm happy to ask it for you.
Yeah, I was just wondering if a landowner was looking to create some new productive hardwood species, would you recommend? You said oak's a good option, but sweet chestnut good, and is there much of a market for this one?
It was quite quiet at my end. I'm not sure if everyone else heard that, but just based on the question in the chat, based on the market, if you were recommending new productive hardwood woodland creation now, which species would you suggest? You mentioned oak, but is sweet chestnut also a good option? And is there a good market for coppice products?
I think I'd always say start with understanding your site. Go on ESC and look at what the actual best species to grow on the site are, and then from that it's looking at what the capabilities of those species are. To go back to the other side, if you're selling timber, there are a number of characteristics in trees that have remained important right through time. So one is that they are straight, they grow straight and ideally have quite small branches on. Some of that's genetics, some of it's silviculture, some of it is species related. The second thing is that you want them to be versatile. So the species that wants to be the option of cutting saw logs, like in oak, you've got grades of saw log. In beech and ash, you don't, but you want to be able to cut a high value product, i.e. a saw log or a veneer butt, a medium value product, which is firewood, and then if it's really poor quality, you want to be able to chip it and put it into the biofuel industry, which means your most hardwoods are good. The only ones they don't like are poplar and willow because it's got too high a natural moisture content. Another characteristic that's becoming more important at the moment is durability, because public perception, society, we're more resistant to chemically modified products. So in hardwoods, oak, sweet chestnut, which have high natural durability, they could be a good commercial choice. In the softwoods, western red cedar certainly will have increasing value. Other species, pine, larch, which absorb treatments well, that will be an important consideration. One that may become is, can they easily be chemically modified? So you see the pine is quite important because that can be is it acetylization? They can convert pine. I know there's companies looking at birch to modify that to use in the medicinal industry. There's some interesting technology coming out about wood modification, and having species that are versatile for that will be important. So straight, durable, a range of products, and then I think the other one that will grow quickly and well on the site that you're choosing. At the moment, the UK firewood market, it likes white hardwoods. There is no reason for that because well-dried oak and chestnut, it burns just as well. At the end of the day, you're buying calories, but that's just visual things. It's the same in the saw and softwood market. The UK, they love whitewood, they love spruce, they're not so keen on redwood, which is pine. So yeah, fast-growing, straight, versatile and durable.
And is there any market for coppice products?
Yes, it tends to be a southern one, but interestingly, I looked at a woodland creation site on Friday, and the fencing, which was a completely new one on me, had all been done with sweet chestnut posts, which had been cut from overstood coppice. So there were 3 to 4 inch diameter, 8 feet long, and they'd been used to hold up a deer fence. And that was a new one. So yes, there is an emerging market for coppice based on durability. There is increasing market as well for hurdles. In terms of landscaping, again, fashion-led, not big volumes, but that market is growing.
Great, thanks. I think Joe, do you want to unmute and answer your question? Ask your question, sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Are there any uses for poplar apart from matchsticks? Which I presume isn't a big market at the moment.
Well, no, poplar isn't. So at the moment, your main markets, there is an export market for it. It goes to India and they use it for construction. Some of it goes into the furniture industry. Poplar is quite good for internal carcassing on kitchen units because it dries well, it's very stable, it's easy to machine, and though it's relatively soft, it's quite good. It is marketed back into the UK as tulip wood. It's quite good. The steel industry likes it for making skids, for packing steel on, because when you put steel on it, it's soft enough that the steel bites, but it doesn't chemically react with it. It's quite popular. Shipbuilders like it for packaging when they're packing big generators and things like that into ship holds. It's quite good for that. It's just the burning industry that is less keen on it because it's got a very, very high natural water content. Globally, yes, there is demand. I mean, Italy, they grow a lot of it and use it, but it tends to be relatively low value.
What sort of size tree would you need to make it of any value at all in Britain?
Oh, sorry, I've just put something on the computer. Just bear with me a sec. It's more quantity. You probably want 100 tons of it, and as a general rule with poplar, the value is 30 centimetre diameter upwards. Once it gets to be about 1 metre in diameter, there's less demand for it. It's too big for most of them to saw.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, the thing with poplar is to find small local markets who are serving the steel industry or steel stockholders, because locally they'll pay quite reasonable money for poplar logs, put it through a mobile sawmill and use it for packaging, for as bearers both on lorries in the yard and things like that. Sorry, Rosanna.
No, sorry. So, John, do you want to unmute and ask your question? I think you're still on mute. So I think you can unmute by going to the top right corner and clicking on the microphone.
Don't worry, John, they had to train me to do all of this before I did the presentation. They're very good at it.
Not sure if we can do it from our end. Oh no, John, sorry, we still can't get you. So up in the right hand corner, there's the microphone, and if you click on that once, the line should come off it. Are you able to type your question in the chat instead, perhaps?
If he wants to email it to you, Rosanna, if you forward it to me, I'll answer it by email if need be, if we're struggling with technology.
Absolutely. John, hopefully you heard that, but we'll email you afterwards and we'll see if we can get your question then. Otherwise, you can pop it in the chat, which is like across the top. There's a kind of a speech bubble that says chat underneath it, so you can click on that and then type your message in there and click on the arrow, and that should come through to us, and we can try and answer that now. Does anyone else have any questions? I've got a broad one. So this has been really helpful. I found it quite illuminating and the whole timber sales process. But if I had any queries or wanted some further advice, where should I go next?
I think anyone who's planning to sell timber, you need to engage the services of a professional manager, because almost every timber sale is thousands of pounds. Most are tens of thousands of pounds, and quite a lot are hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds. And it's substantial sums of money. You wouldn't set to work to do a building project of £500,000 without a quantity surveyor. If you're going to engage in a timber sale that could be that much, you would need a professional forest manager, and that's who you should go to in the first instance to help you produce the sale. As the owner, have clear objectives, but please engage a professional to help deliver the sale for you and represent you when you're dealing with the purchasers.
Has anyone else got any questions? We've still got about 5 minutes or so left before we wrap up. And I've got one final one. Are there any tools that I can use or that could help produce my the information for individuals to come and look at my parcel or what I'm trying to sell?
I think there's huge. I'm of the age where digital mapping, it fascinates me, and I love it when someone else has done it, but I struggle with it myself. I am teaching myself, but it's slow. I think good quality mapping is the biggest help to getting a good timber sale ready. And by that I mean clearly identifying boundaries, access, features, variations in the crop. And that tells the purchaser that you've done your homework. The crop information, old people like me use a girth tape, a clinometer to measure the height, and a tape measure to do my volume sample trees. There is digital equipment out there that will do that far faster and far more accurately now, but it demands specialist knowledge to use it, but it is all there. And that's one of the ideas behind this project, is to use My Forest in terms of the mapping and inventory is a simple and easy to access unit for any forest owner, whether they've got an acre or whether they've got 100 acres, to get the basic information recorded, and it helps you go through that, gives you the necessary information. We're currently working on a module which will allow the owner to upload their information from My Forest into timber auctions, so we can run it as a competitive sale for them. So yeah, it's not a plug for My Forest, it is an explanation from a woodland owner that actually it's really useful, and it's a very, very simple and easy to access system.
Absolutely, and if anyone wants to find out more about it, we'll be here in 2 weeks' time talking about it and getting a demonstration from the guys at My Forest. I've got a question from C. I don't know if you want to unmute. It turns out that your microphone's on the lower left, so John, that might help you with your conundrum. So if we go to C first, and then we'll try John for one final time. Oh no, okay. So Ollie, what can you do with small quantities of ash felled for dieback?
Firewood. I'm afraid there are local guys who will take an odd come and collect an odd nice ash log, but realistically it's the firewood markets that's best. Generally the merchants will buy, if you've got a lorry load at roadside and it's got access for an articulated lorry, 25, 27 tons, they will come and take it away, and they will pay you for it. But small quantities, it's finding local people who will buy it as firewood.
Okay, and then finally, John, do you want to go ahead and ask your question.
I think I've made it now. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's well, my system has it down bottom. Can you believe it? Bottom center, not top right. But never mind. I've made it. Thank you, Oliver. It's a good, very nice presentation. One of the elements I've found in the last 16 or 17 years is the importance of making local contacts to build up your regular marketing, particularly in relationship if you've got a forest that you're translating into continuous cover. You are actually producing timber constantly. So it's quite different from the big clear fells. You're selecting your timber, you're taking it out steadily, but it's coming out in small volumes. How best to market that sort of productivity, which may well increase in the future?
It's an interesting one, continuous cover. I mean, because it produces an assortment of products, and some of them can be quite, you can have quite large, long length logs.
Yeah.
It's understanding what your local markets are. I mean, my suggestion would be to sit down and look at what you're going to fell each year or every 5 years, and then talk to a number of the local buyers and say, this is what we're going to have coming up. Because there are spikes, particularly with the market for oversized spruce logs. It can vary. It's feast or famine, and you don't want to be having it. You don't want to be having yours sat at roadside in the time when someone up the road's felling 10 hectares of large spruce. But you almost can be at the situation where the mill rings and says, well, we need some 6 metre logs. Can you fell them? Yes, well, I can do them in a month or 3 months. It's building relationships and understanding what there is locally. And you're dead right, with continuous cover, there are often small niche markets about, and those are the ones that can make it pay very well. It's finding a fencing one. So if they suddenly have a need for 9-foot strainer posts for deer fencing, can you cut those?
Yeah, I think that is actually what we found, that small sawmills locally will ring you up and say, can I have some ash? Can I have some larch?
Yeah.
Not so keen on taking the pine, but fortunately we've got bedmax right next door, so we've always got an outlet there. But it is difficult sometimes to get a continuous program, a planned program going when you've got a very intermittent demand.
And it's not a hardwood buyer once explained it to me like this. He said, if you put a parcel of hardwood out, and he said, and I haven't, he said, I like it and it's really good quality logs, and I know that I might be able to use it one day. He said, I'm buying it for stock and it might be sat in my yard for a year, 2 years. He said, I might have to saw it and sit it in my yard for 2 years before someone takes it. But he said, if you advertise your parcel of timber and I've got a tender on my desk that says I need large diameter oak for lock gates or marine piling, and you land that under my nose, and I can bid and buy it and then sell it, he said that can make 25 to 30% difference in the price I can pay. And it's always been one of the challenges of the more diverse forests is getting the contractors who can work it and do the job properly, then cut the assortments that you want, and then connect yourself with the market that will take it and have it available when you want it. And softwood's commodity marketing until you get into continuous cover, and then you're producing niche, some commodity and some niche and specialist products. I'm sorry, that's a rambling answer, but yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And fortunately, the one thing, as you said, mentioned earlier, that backs is your basis for all your management is your firewood market.
Yeah.
Biomass, because whatever you're doing, whether you're thinning, cleaning out or whatever, you can always move that timber on to your biomass. So you have a separate biomass stack, which is perpetually being raised up and then removed down the road.
I mean, just as an aside, my life in forestry, when I started in harvesting in Wales, I remember we'd go to an estate and we'd look and we'd say to them, well, yeah, we can pay you plus £12 a tonne for your spruce final thinnings. Yeah, we can do the first thinnings of Norway at probably and pay you £1 a tonne. But that hardwood thinning, it's going to be -4 or -6 pounds a tonne. That was what we were doing. And so you'd add it all up and the owner would turn around to you and say, hang on a second. So I'm going to get £2,000 for you to spend 3 months trashing my wood, and my wife's going to give me grief because every time she rides a horse down the drive, there's mud over it. Well, yeah, and it wasn't an easy sale. You were getting £24 a tonne for hardwood pulp delivered into St Regis. Firewood was about £20 a tonne at roadside, and the labour rate for first things was £25 a tonne. You come forward to today, firewood is worth £90 a tonne at roadside, and biomass probably worth 45, 50, certainly 40. Your contract rate is still 25. So even your very, very worst grade timber is plus £15 a tonne. Your firewood can be plus £65 a tonne. Yeah. And that heat market, we should never ever lose. That has been the big change. That's underpinned the market. The bit that really frightens me at the moment is all this negative press about wood burning stoves, because that is the single thing that's transformed woodland management in England.
Yeah, but I think what people need is a little bit of a sense of history. I'm old enough to remember, and I was brought up in South Yorkshire when we had smogs that you couldn't see more than 10 feet.
Yeah.
Now that's pollution, that's air pollution. Today, if you look at my trees in my orchard here, they've got lichen on them about 9 inches long, which is a suggestion that the air quality is fantastic. And I think we're nitpicking about minor degrees of air pollution. And the particulate matter people have got it into their heads that burning wood is the problem. But, as we found with Storm Arwen, the number of people who rang into radio programs and said, thank God for my wood burner, because the electricity was off, the water was off because it needed electricity, and the wood burner was the only thing that kept me alive.
There's also a really important consideration in terms of environmental management. It's generally acknowledged that about the worst thing you can do for biodiversity is do nothing to your woodland and leave it.
Yeah.
So active management is considered to be good. The method of delivery of active management is cutting trees down. And if you want to do any conversion, change the structure, influence the light, you've got to cut trees down. And the firewood, the energy and firewood market has transformed that, and it's made, there's almost no woods, which almost any wood I've come across now, you can work, and at the very worst, it'll be break even. Mostly it's a cash positive to the owner.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'm quite positive about it, I must say. And if this weekend's demand for firewood is a reflection of what's happening, I think we're okay.
We love a cold weather forecast. It's brill.
It's wonderful.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you very much, Ollie from Timber Auctions, for giving us a good overview of kind of how to sell your timber and what's needed, and also where to go next if you do indeed have some timber to sell. A couple of announcements just to finish off. We've obviously got our webinar that Will's already mentioned next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. You can sign up using the Eventbrite link, which will pop into the chat in just a moment, and it's on how to engage contractors, and Will's going to give a good kind of overview and a bit of insight into best practice and how to get what you want from your contractors. We've also currently got our woodland owner survey that's open. It's shutting in a week's time, so I'm just popping the link.
I think the technology may have failed there. Rosanna, you've gone quiet.
Oops. How long was I off for? Was it off for the whole thing?
About 10 seconds.
Oh, right, okay. So I think I said our woodland owner survey is open and shuts next Wednesday. Just put the link in the chat. Please, if you're a woodland owner, fill it in. We're trying to get insight from why you have woodlands and what you want from them. There are a number of prizes, including the My Forest platform. We've got 5 licenses to some lucky winners there to get the premium subscription for a year. There are other prizes as well. And hopefully we'll see you on our event next Tuesday at 6 p.m. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get the right person to answer it, whether it's Ollie or someone else from the Northwoods team. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Need to finish the recording.